what do you know a lot about versus what do you not know a lot about? I mean, I've specifically hired people because I'm like, great, they have a background that has dealt with laser and radiation safety, where in my life prior to Boston Scientific, I never would have thought about laser safety, not even twice, right?
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Colbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Colbert. I'm thrilled to talk to today's guest because she has built an impressive career by helping organizations create safer, more sustainable, and more efficient workplaces. Her journey spans manufacturing, logistics, environmental services, and life sciences, giving her a unique perspective on what it takes to build strong safety cultures in complex and fast-paced environments. She's a sustainability professional whose career began with a dual degree in environmental sustainability and energy applications and Christian ministries from Lindsey Wilson College. She is an EHS leader who has helped drive measurable safety improvements across some of the world's most complex operating environments, including Amazon, Clean Harbors, and Boston Scientific. She currently serves as the Environment, Health, and Safety Manager at Boston Scientific. Lindsey Seiberling, welcome to the Facility Rockstars podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you are here, and thank you for investing your time with us, Lindsey.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited.
Cool. Let's do this. So, based upon, like we just mentioned, three major companies, major brands, right? Major logos, if you will, and all the things you've done throughout your career so far. That being said, what's been your biggest lesson learned?
I think my biggest lesson learned is that wherever you go, people are just people trying to do a job, put a little bit more money in their pocket, and leave their job safely so that way they can go home to their friends, families, hobbies, pets, whatever they have going on. Work is just a very minute part of that, but in workplaces, there are hazards that need to be addressed, especially from an EHS perspective. But at the end of the day, we all just want to go home with more money in our pockets with all of our same fingers and toes.
I like how you just broke that down. That's fantastic. So true. So true. Can you say a little more on that? I think EHS is a very large part of that. It's a very large spoke in that wheel.
Yeah. So, when it comes to being an EHS professional, I think a lot of the time, we feel like we have to come in like the bad guys and tell people this is what you can or cannot do. And so when we get pushback, we feel like, you know, we're getting pushback for no reason for things that seem very reasonable to us as EHS professionals. But, I think it's remembering that this is only somebody's like gig that they're here during the day. And so I think some of that pushback it's from their misunderstanding of we're trying to make their lives harder. Which is absolutely not the truth, especially if you're a good EHS professional, right? You're doing it for the well-being of the employees or the well-being of the environment. So I think just understanding maybe the frustration where somebody's coming from, or understanding that we as EHS professionals need to frame things in a different way in order to make sure that we tackle the problem, not the person, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the fact that you said, I believe you said it's very reasonable to you and your part of the business, although it may not seem reasonable or necessary to some others. And that kind of that actually leads me back to something we'd previously talked about. And that's, I think we were talking about building relationships with operational partners. And so does that fit together? Does that tie into where we're going here?
Yeah, I think absolutely, right? So, I just remember in my time and experience, in particular, in the safety part of things more so than the environmental. that, people would be like, I don't understand why we have to do this. And like, you can bring up what the OSHA regulation is, what the OSHA requirements are. But if you're not like, hey, this is to make sure you get to go home to your friends and your family, and, understand that, like, there are consequences for things that could happen, and the consequences minimally happen to me, right? Of course, there are things like fines and incident reporting and all that kind of stuff, but in the end, brass tacks, it's the negative effect that's had on usually that employee, where it's the most harmful or detrimental, right?
Sure. Absolutely. So, if you were to put a best practice or share with us how, like, how do you successfully build these operational partner relationships? Like, can you give us an example?
Yeah, so that's where I mean, in any kind of operational setting, right? You need to understand what is their goal and what is their objective. Like, is their goal, let's just say, to manufacture a widget in 2 minutes, but also, be able to do some other like quality things in the meantime, right? It's understanding, hey, what is their goal and their objective, and then being able to look at what they're doing, identify the risks, and kind of be like, okay, based off of what we're doing, here are some of the constraints. How do we work within the confines of these restraints, but still do it safely and still follow all the regulatory practices, right? And so when you tackle it from the standpoint of I'm not trying to put barriers on this thing for you. I'm trying to make sure that OSHA, EPA, any of those people don't come knocking on our door and we can function business as usual, right? And so I think when you frame it within that aspect, it's a lot easier of a pill to swallow, in particular from an operations when they have very either strict manufacturing or they're trying to complete a very specific job, right?
I love the fact that you said what is, or you acknowledged that you're understanding what their goal, what I'm sorry, what their goal and what their objective is or are. Because like that's when that for me shows true alignment.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're not here without the business, right? And so, not saying that EH&S can be foregone, right? But we don't have work if there is no business to be conducted, right?
Mhm.
So we're here to support and be a partner to the business and the operation. And we're here to help them do it successfully and safely and environmentally sound, right?
So when you approach, yeah, absolutely. When you approach it that way, have you seen examples of where people are like, oh, okay, I'm not, it's not a gotcha situation. It's not a, do they embrace it more?
Yeah, I found that, especially in kind of those more extreme cases where you have higher volume of hazards. So clean harbors, for example, we had a lot of confined spaces. And so operations for that is obviously very complex because you're basically sending somebody into a potentially high hazard space with limited egress, right? And so when you're like, hey, I want to help you clean this tank, but I need you to come out of the same tank the same way you went in, right? I think it does put a lot of that into perspective.
That's a really good example. That's one of the, I wouldn't say maybe not one of the most dangerous, but it's certainly a potentially dangerous situation when you have confined spaces. So, yeah, good
Absolutely. Yeah.
example. Um, so you mentioned clean harbors. We talked about you being at Amazon. Now you're at Boston Scientific. What would you say in any of the places may have been you and your team's biggest challenge or the most difficult situation you've faced together?
Yeah, I think it's understanding just the changing complexity of some of the operations, right? So with Amazon, it was pretty set on what the operations in. We bring boxes in, we stow the boxes, we pull the boxes, we pack the box into another box, and then onto a truck it goes, right? Where with Clean Harbors, in particular with their field services, it was a new challenge in an emergency response every day kind of change is the name of the game with that kind of business. And so trying to understand, okay, what are the safety constraints? And then R&D is very similar where like what they're doing every day changes, right? How do you keep up with the risk assessments? So I think a lot of that is solved by having really good relationships with your operational partners where they're not afraid to come to you with things. They're like, hey, we actually want to tell you about this new activity that we're doing. So that way we can tackle those hazards together and we can solve the problem together.
I love your answer. It's the first time I've heard it put that way on the show. We're, I think, 119 episodes in now, and changing complexity of the operations. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the examples because they're different. But whether it's R&D or 17 boxes and then out the door, right? Like there's so. Did you find again a best practice or anything that helps you to kind of streamline and pivot with that change in complexity?
Yeah, I think part of it is know who their operational partners are and spend time in those spaces. Unfortunately, as an EHS manager at Boston Scientific, I of course am not able to spend as much visible time in those spaces. But if you run a team, right, have your team spend time in those spaces, have them do walkarounds, have them talk to people. Because when people talk to you about things, you learn a lot, right? And so, when I was at Amazon, it was either I or my employees spending a lot of time on the floor, especially as like a baseline EHS professional, spend the time learning the processes because within those processes, they'll be like, oh, hey, we're looking to change X, Y, and Z. And you learn a lot by just spending time and talking with people about their job and what they do.
I love that. I love that. Little bit of a just a fun question here for you, but a real one, right? What do you love most about your job or your role, and why?
Yeah. I would say it's kind of like the ultimate Rubik's Cube, with that changing complexity and pattern, you're always gonna have a new problem or even a very complex problem to solve, right? And so I think in between that and just knowing at the end of the day, my job is to do a good thing, right? Which, I don't know if everybody can say that about their jobs, but I certainly feel that way about mine.
I'd say that's a good why, a good reason to get up and go and do it.
Yeah,
Really good one.
absolutely.
I know we've touched on sustainability and waste reduction. So what's been your experience with this particular topic? What could you share with us on that, Lindsay?
Yeah, so with my degree, I studied a lot of kind of looking at waste stream elimination, right? So whenever you have a process or you're making something, right, there's always going to be something that either doesn't fit right within the quality specification, or it, of course, is just going to be a byproduct of that process, right? So, you know, because of that, I started my career on the operations side of scrap metal recycling because I was really passionate about of like, what do we do with the things that aren't quote unquote useful to us anymore, right? So I think when you're looking at your processes, um, just kind of look and be like, where can we cut the fat? Do we really need 4 clips in this pack? Right? Kind of looking at to where you can streamline your processes or, do customers do a voice of the customer, right? Being like, what do you want out of this product? And so that'll allow you to assess like, hey, we can take X number of clips out, they only use X number, right? So I think looking at your manufacturing processes from the top down and then figuring out from there, okay, what are the waste streams that we aren't going to be able to get rid of? And then match them with either somebody who can recycle them or looking at, hey, can they at least use this byproduct for something, right?
Hmm. Hey, rock stars. If you're tuning into the podcast and are feeling overwhelmed by all the maintenance demands at your facility, don't stress. We've got you covered. Our sponsor, Coludis, is your go-to partner to help you tackle all those demands and get them done right, on time, and with top-notch quality. From project planning to execution, Coludis is there to make hard work easy. Visit paludis.com today to get started. You know, I'm going to get, it just seems fitting. I'm going to give you an example here because, so ocean spray. I love your answer, by the way. And this is like, this is amazing to me. You familiar with craisins or anyone listening familiar with craisins? Right, the little package. Yeah, they're not raisins, they're cranberries, craisins, get it. But they were spending as a company, I don't know how much money, but a lot of money on that wasted product, right? It was like a byproduct. And then, the now multi-million, billion, whatever he is, CEO, who came up with the idea of a crazy, well, wait a minute, this could be a food that we sell instead of its waste and getting rid. So, just to your point of how many clips do we need? Like, it's amazing when you just got me there on like, well, how many clips do you need? And why do we need them? And what happens with them? So I love this line of thinking. So thanks for letting me share my story with you too.
Yeah. No problem. Thank you to the man who decided to use that waste stream as craisins, because now I get to have it on a nice salad with goat cheese, you know?
Right? Exactly. I have one in a wrap today, so there we go, right? We're
There you
we're
go.
we're both eating them. What advice would you give? I'm going to ask us this way, right? So, if you were to give someone advice entering this career or this role, and then what advice would you give a peer currently in the role, Lindsay? Like, what would you say to somebody?
Yeah, so I'd say for people starting to enter, right? Kind of a couple of bullet points here. So first, I'd say learn to have hard discussions. Um, Conflict is going to happen no matter what you do if you are an EHS professional. I think handling conflict in a healthy way is really helpful not only to your professional life, but your personal life as well. So I think that conflict and understanding what healthy conflict looks like is really beneficial to somebody looking to come into EHS. The other one that I would say is figure out if you want to be somebody who's like very specialized in something, or figure out, do you want to be a generalist? Because that'll drive kind of where you go to work. That'll drive the roles that you seek out. It'll drive all sorts of things in your career, right? So I would say figure out, do you want to do large umbrella EHS? Or do you want to get really specific and focused into something like maybe industrial hygiene? Do you want to do industrial wastewater? That kind of thing.
I love your answer. It's just fantastic. A little more tactical on the second half there, but I think it's good life advice you gave. I took a note, learn to have the hard discussions and handle conflict in a healthy way. Uh, so true. Whether it's the manufacturing floor, the office, whether you're a parent or a partner, you're like it's all relevant. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Great stuff. So we've also touched on how you value different perspectives in EH&S. I don't know if that relates to your advice given or not, but say more about that, please, Lindsay.
Yeah, so it does relate to it a little bit, but also it's just understanding with people, whether it's different disabilities, or like people who come from different backgrounds, whether it's work history, et cetera, right? They all hold a piece of the puzzle on knowledge or maybe things that you're not seeing. So for example, I've had safety committee members who are deaf and hard of hearing and they operated pit. And so I know a lot of EHS professionals initially would kind of, you know, shirk at the idea, right? Of having someone deaf or hard of hearing operating the pit. But to be honest, they were one of the safest pit operators that we have on that floor. Because they're not distracted. They're very focused on what they're doing and they're more observant to visualize and look at the things around them. Right.
Hmm.
So I would say, they brought up some of the best continual improvement ideas because they would observe these things that are going on because they weren't distracted in other ways. So I think that's a valuable lesson to take into account.
That's a powerful example right there. Makes total sense too. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Like,
And I do want to mention too, in between our discussion here, that a couple of your colleagues have been on the show, Paul and Lori, and you are the third one from Boston Scientific, which I am very grateful for.
yeah. Well, what can I say? We like to believe we're for facilities rock stars and hope we can put our money where our mouth is. So
There you go. Well, you absolutely are. Um, you talked about different perspectives, and we've gone through a lot. And I know we've talked about how to build a well-rounded EH&S team, and why is that important, Lindsay, to you?
to be honest, it's because I myself am never gonna know everything. Right? What do you know a lot about versus what do you not know a lot about? I mean, I've specifically hired people because I'm like, great, they have a background that has dealt with laser and radiation safety, where in my life prior to Boston Scientific, I never would have thought about laser safety, not even twice, right? I just assumed, they're cool and sciency. But, with that being said, I just didn't know about a lot about lasers. So I've done hires based on my gaps of knowledge. And to be honest, like you have to, as a leader, have to be humble enough to say, yeah, I don't know. And to be honest, it's gonna take me 6 months to figure it out. So, if you have the headcount and the capability, hire where you're weak is
Mm.
essentially the summary, right? Because you're not gonna ever know anything, and there's gonna be people who know more than you on specific topics, right? It's creating that team where you have most of your bases covered. Um, Never gonna have them all covered, unfortunately, because we don't get unlimited budget. But even if you can't hire that headcount, right? It's, can I keep a consultant on retainer that knows about these things? So that way, when I have questions, I can go and ask them too.
Yeah, I love that's such a well-rounded answer to the question, right? Because I think one of the most powerful traits people can have is the ability to say, I don't know. That's when you learn, right? So, good for you. Good for you. Um, really, really good content. And I want to flip it a little bit now for you, Lindsay. Kind of touched on a lot of important things here, and we learned a lot about what you do day to day at either Amazon, Boston Sci, et cetera. What's exciting outside of EHS for you, right? Like who is Lindsay when she's not immersed in this world?
Yeah. I kind of have a couple of different hobbies, right? So, my fiance and I, we are avid home cooks and home
Mm.
bartenders. We love experimenting with new foods, trying new things, right? Especially when it comes to the bar or the kitchen. Of course, we love to spend time outside with our pug Charles. He is currently the little light of our life, and just adorable but very stubborn. And then,
He's
just
the
kind of
boss.
he likes to believe he's the boss, but he is 18 pounds, so we can pick him up at any time. We lovingly call it air jail. Sure, many a small dog parent can relate. Um, and then, I am musically inclined, so whenever I get a little extra time, love to pick up guitar, ukulele, sing a tune or two. But you know, with all the other things in life, sometimes that's the one that tends to get put on the back burner the most.
I would say you're well-rounded with your team and with your cool things that you like to do. So that's awesome. I have a question. What's your favorite dish?
What's my favorite dish?
Hmm.
So I think it depends on where you're looking globally, just because global cuisine is so broad and so vast, it's very hard to like pick one thing. But I think if I were going to choose, it would be Korean stone bowl bibimbap with pork bulgogi. Just because you get all the nice little fixins and the vegetables, the rice gets nice and crispy on the bottom, and if you're a consumer of pork, pork bulgogi is delicious, spicy, sweet, salty, marinated pork just all mixed in there with crispy rice. It's absolutely delicious.
I've never had it. Now I need to. It sounds delicious. Awesome. It was awesome talking with you. How would people get in touch, Lindsay, if they wanted to follow up after they hear the show and get in touch?
Yes. So, I'm on LinkedIn, just like everybody else. The one thing I do request is, please don't try to sell me things. I'm more than happy to to have a conversation, set up a time to chat after that. But yeah, please don't try to sell me stuff. I'm more than happy to advise, to coach. But that's primarily my bread and butter and the reason why I use LinkedIn.
That's great. Lindsey, thank you so much for taking your time with us today and sharing all your knowledge and experience with all of our listeners and our whole community. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I hope it's helpful to somebody out there.
I'm quite sure it will be. I'm quite sure. And thank you to everyone who tunes in week after week. And it's been another great show. We'll see everyone next time. It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.